So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final webinar of Houseful project. This is the agenda for it today. We will have two separate roundtables. The first one is going to be Houseful Unpack, where we will do a bit of an introduction and lessons learned of the project. And in the second one, we'll talk about the end of waste status for value chain, water, and construction. Okay, so if we start, we have a tight schedule, so we will try to keep the timetable. Okay. You can go to the next. Oh no, we don't see Carolina. We see the presentation mode. So the whole screen. I don't know if you have passed the next slide. Maybe you have two screens. Or just go the next and okay, so I'll just keep going, okay? So as I was saying, it's a pleasure for me to introduce this final webinar because I got the chance to be involved in the project at the very beginning. It was in 2017 when we started with the proposal writing. And back then, we had expertise in energy efficiency in buildings. We also work on materials for constructions. But when we wrote circular buildings on the Google search, that's what we've got. And I don't know if you get to see it, but it's really not what we meant with circular buildings. So we really wanted to move from the linear economy to a circular economy within the building and housing sector. So it is possible to do this transition. It's also difficult, but we just really need to focus on some of the circular economy principles that back then were applied already to other sectors, but that we need to also work on the construction, and this is what we've been done during these years of project. So one of the principles of the circular economy is to design out waste. So this means that we not only reduce the pollution or recycle the waste at the end of the building lifespan, but we really need to think about it at the very beginning. When we are designing the building, we need to think about the materials. What kind of materials are we going to use if they are non-toxic? And then regarding the maintenance, the deconstruction, will it be possible to repair or reuse some materials at some point of the different life stages of the building, and also the needs, the energy, the water needs that building will need. Okay, another principle is that we need to keep products and materials in use as much as possible with the same value, right? And in this order, first of all, we have the products, so we need to maintain those products. If not, maybe we can take some of those components so that can be remanufactured and we can use them again, and at the end, the materials. Right? And something important too is the regenerating of natural systems. Okay, it's important to identify all the flows that we've got on the building. So we are really used to energy, and materials, the mass balance flow, but we also need to know all the nutrients and how do we have everything on the the material passport of the building, and see what we've got so that we could be more efficient, right? Maybe in an industry sector, waste to energy is something that it's more often done, but we need also to look for that on the buildings. Okay, so it's not only energy efficiency. Actually, circular economy goes beyond this efficiency, right? Of course, we need to be efficient, but what I'm saying is that we need to rethink. We need to have this holistic approach in whatever we're doing, in this case, the building and the housing sector. And we can achieve this through co-creation, which is something that it's going to explain today too, so that it's not something that has to be done by only one person or one sector. So all the stakeholders of the value chain need to work together. So technology experts, owners, also the architects, citizens, policymakers, so that we can really find these solutions. And this is actually what why Houseful was born, to demonstrate that circular solutions are not only better for the environment, but also economically feasible for the industry and the provider, and also taking into account a social dimension too. Okay, so now I'll give the floor to Carolina Carbó from Leitat. She's the project manager of Houseful, and she will explain us briefly the project and the lessons learned through those 5 years.
Thank you, Marta. Okay, as Marta was saying, as I am the project coordination of Houseful, I've been doing this for the last year and a half or so, but the partners has been working on this project for 6 months. We have 15 partners, and I'm sorry we are not going to go through everything because it's too many things. We cannot go into details in this 15 minutes presentation of the project. So it might feel like a catalog of things that we've done, and I'm going to mention the main issues that we have and how we have to change some of the things we develop, and how we adapted the technologies to fit with the things that you encounter throughout the project. The project was divided in 4 main vectors, which are materials, water, waste, and energy, and a 5th one, which is more transversal one. For this presentation and for today presentations in general, we decided to focus the attention on certain of these items and not providing you with all the details of the results and graphics and so on. It's more like comments on the things we've done. And we are going to leave you with links for you to look for more information. I hope your curiosity kicks in and you go there and check them. So the first one of these vectors is the holistic one. And here we have 3 different solutions. And we are going to have an exclusive presentation about the SaaS platform. So I'm not going to mention too much about this first one. The second one is a circularity tool, which can help us evaluate how circular are our buildings. And this one implies a wider evaluation when compared to other certifications of the buildings. And again, this will be mentioned within the SaaS platform. And it's really a whole presentation within itself. So again, this will be not fully developed within this presentation. The third one is the co-creation, which for me was a first in one of the projects that among the projects I participated, the co-creation. It was a lot of work done in this area, and we do have an exclusive presentation about this. So again, the only thing I'm going to mention about this is something that affects us, all of us, was going through a pandemic while doing this. And everyone has to adapt themselves to keep working, but co-creation was a bigger challenge, I think, because it's definitely not the same as meeting with all the tenants and discussing with them in person and switching that to online meetings when not everyone was ready to do it. So this is something to point out as well as today, and all these issues with presenting and not presenting, with so many options to go online. The next one is materials, and I like to mention that materials and energy, I see them with similarities, and I think they have a past that is more in certain way defined when compared to water and waste, and because there's more things done and more things accepted when talking about circularity in buildings is still a lot of things to improve and many things to overcome to reach the goal that we really want to. But the path, I think, is a little bit clearer than in the other two options or the other two vectors. First, we work with BIM models, 3D models for material passports, and also regarding local materials and selecting environmental friendly materials. And this is also reflected on the SaaS platform, these local markets and how to reach them. And energy, in energy, we work about improving the facade and the materials, how to choose the sustainable materials for these applications, and also providing renewable energy within the building. And again, this is it's very big investment. It's not things that are done every day, although energy is used every day. And this is one of the things that is different when compared to the other vectors, because water goes in and out every day. Materials don't go in and out every day, and energy it goes in and it's being used, but doesn't go out. When we talk about water, and we have to make a difference between among which type of water we are talking about, because you have rainwater, you have gray water, which is all the water used within a house, except from the one from toilets. And then we have unsegregated water, which is all of them included water from toilets. And the limitations and the technologies and the permits that you need to have, depending on what type of water you're using, are quite different. When you have blood water, which is the water coming from toilets, the level of testing and permits is much more complicated. And that's the point where we have to make adaptations, because we're not able to implement all the things we wanted to implement. And we have 4 different demo sites where we implemented different technologies. And for water, we have 3 different types of implementation. The first one was for a green wall system for rainwater and gray water. And then we have another one, and another system was done in a patio in another demo, also for the same kind of water. And the third demo we have for the water vector was for unsegregated water. This was done in Austria. Regarding waste, which is definitely not the best term we want to use, because we don't want this to be considered as a waste, but as a resource. But still, we use this word. We have different technologies. The first one, which was a pilot plant called an anaerobic membrane bioreactor. This will the input was blood water and bio waste to generate biogas and compost. And this was linked with another solution about composting that has to be adapted, because again, the tenants on the demo site that we are going to work on this were reluctant to accept this technology. The space limitations was also a key issue. Many of these technologies cannot be easily adapted in any situation. So we have to move this demo to another location, and we keep it at latest facilities because we have more space. So it was implemented at a pilot plant level anyway, but just in a different location. The next technology that we work on was a dry anaerobic digester. This was done by home biogas. And again, here we have the limitation, because the original idea was to use black water plus bio waste. And this was in Austria. And we were not able to get the permits to work with the black water. So we still apply this technology with some adaptations and some improvements to the existing technologies. It was the first implementation at home level in Austria. And because of the cold weather region, we have to do a modification of the system to improve its performance, because in the winter, it will not have work. the way it works in other regions. But again, here we had to make a modification from the initial idea of what we wanted to develop. And the last one of this waste process in waste to energy technologies was biogas cleaning and revalorization of the biogas. And with this one, we encounter again a very difficult thing to overcome, because when the gas from the first system, from the pilot plant of the bioreactor came out, it doesn't have the composition to be able to be injected into the grid of the gas grid. So it has to go through a process of purification. But to insert that into the system for the purification, you have to compress the gas, and that requires a special environment, and it's an ATEX environment, and it's very hard to get that and to accommodate that environment within a building and within our other facilities. So we had to stop that at a level scale, and this was not done further than that. The compost solutions and was also adapted because it was linked to the pilot plant, and once that was moved, the compost solution was also changed and moved. And the final one is regarding the materials and how to make the best use of materials once you go to demolition or to rehabilitation, and how to try to reuse materials, etc. This also is linked to the solution in materials about the local markets, and is also reflected on the SaaS platform. For details on all the things that we have worked and we have developed, I'm listing 2 links here. The first for resources, which are printable materials or to read materials, papers, handbooks, deliverables. And the other one is about a link in YouTube where you can find all the Houseful videos. We have different videos done by partners explaining technologies, demo sites visits, and also seminars on the specific vectors you have on materials, water, waste, and energy. I'm also listing 2 emails for contact us, coordination and information, and we can forward your question to the specific department developing the technology. And another thing I wanted to mention, I cannot give you too much detail because we just signed up for this, is the Horizon Results Booster. We signed up for Module A. We are in the first stages where they're gathering projects with the same kind of interest to form a group. So that's the only thing I can mention. If you don't know too much about Horizon Booster, you can check on the link I listed on the bottom of the slide, and I can tell you later on how this works. And I wanted to add a few slides about discussion. This is not so much about what we have done exactly on Houseful, and to link to our second section. And regarding energy, and this is not something we've done, we didn't work on energy communities or things like that, but a few years ago, not too many people knew what a prosumer was or anything about energy communities, and renewable energy and photovoltaics or thermosolar was not that common, was not everyday words for most people. And this is growing. And I want to make you think about how about this kind of concept for water and waste, and regenerated water and waste to energy. Waste to energy is done in central plants when waste is burned to recover energy, but waste to biogas is not that common, and it's definitely not common on a smaller scale. So can we think about prosumers and energy, waste to energy or regenerated water communities, or plans, decentralized plans about these technologies, and how to push this technology forwards for more people and make it more affordable because of the scaling up? Since we find that the scaling up is one of the issues to make this affordable. For any solutions in circular buildings, things that we still have to work is in scaling up and space, testing and affordability, especially when we talk about water, acceptance of the publics, and reliability of the technology, legislation and permits, financing, because for certain technologies it's not easy to find special financing. It's easier for envelopes, for renewable energy, but if you go to waste or to water, there is no special financing, at least not in Spain. I've been checking around here. And contracts and insurance, because if we want to find this kind of models between buildings or between different owners, we do have to have this to assist the technology to growth. And beyond Houseful, since we work at building scale, the next step will be moving these technologies to the city level. And in city levels, we have to talk not only about buildings, but other structures that can help you allocate these technologies. And we can also transfer these technologies to the industry on industrial parks. Thank you everyone for your attention, and I leave the room to the next presenter.
Thank you, Carolina. So now is the turn of Dara Turnbull. He is from Housing Europe and will give us a vision from the circular transition from local to European level. The floor is yours, Dara.
Perfect. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So yes, I'll be very brief, but what effectively I want to try and communicate in the time that I have is summary as best I can of the different conversations that we had over the whole lifespan of Houseful, with stakeholders both within the project and their broader networks, but also policymakers, local communities, and so on. Keeping in mind, Houseful was a 5-year project, so over that 5 years, we gathered an awful lot of information. And one of the main things that we had to do within that time was to turn that information into a set of policy recommendations and other recommendations that then could be fed to policymakers at every tier of government that would then hopefully put Europe as a whole on a better pathway or better footing towards a circular transition. So just very, very quickly, I'm coming from Housing Europe, which is the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing Providers. As you see here, we represent about 43,000 local housing organizations right across the European Union, and indeed outside of the European Union. So from our network, we have access to, thankfully, a lot of people who have a stake within the circular transition, and we've been able to turn our network into kind of these policy recommendations and various other deliverables throughout the project. So everything we did began with this one simple question, which is how achievable is circularity today? So what is meant by that is, if you wanted to do effectively what we're doing in Houseful, how replicable is it? What are the barriers? What are the obstacles that you might encounter? And basically, what do we need to do to make sure that Houseful type projects are far more common than is currently the case? And what we found is that actually, of course, this is not simply an EU level competence or an EU level issue, although that does have an impact, and it's something we'll hear about probably as the session progresses. But every tier of government, from the most local level up to the EU level, but also including regional level, member state level, they all have a role to play in making sure that the current barriers and obstacles that exist are removed as much as possible. It's also important to mention that the different barriers and obstacles that we encounter in the project are not universal. So for example, the barriers and obstacles which maybe we observed in the demo sites in Catalonia are not necessarily the same as those we observed in Austria. And that comes down to differences in the interpretation of for example, EU directives or various kind of locally specific factors. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. And one of the things that we really encourage within Houseful is that policymakers right across Europe really have a root and branch review of their practices and kind of see about, at a local level at least, what could they be doing better to replicate these kind of circular solutions. So just to give you one example, I will say that there is a publication that's forthcoming. We're waiting for approval from the European Commission to publish the report. But basically, we've put together a set of policy recommendations coming out of Houseful. I think there are about 80 policy recommendations in total. Some of them have the potential to be extremely consequential, and some are maybe, let's say, more niche or more localized in terms of their impact and their scope. Just to give you one example, and I could have picked any example, but this is one I picked. So you see in the green box, this is the issue that we identified within the project, and that comes from conversations that we had with various stakeholders. So the issue that we identified was that the EU water reuse regulation sets out which analysis needs to be conducted and the frequency for sampling. The requirement of bi-weekly sampling is a barrier for using on-site or decentralized water treatment systems. So that's the issue that we identified. The next step we had to go through was to try and see, okay, why is this issue exist? Is it in existence because of some outdated piece of legislation? Is there a good reason why this maybe is the case? And kind of try to get a grasp of why this problem exists in the first place, and then maybe that can help to better inform potential policy solutions. So what you see, the very last bullet point on this page, that's a quote from a recent EU-supported report about this very topic of water reuse. And what it said was that despite the obvious economic and environmental benefits of the circular economy approach in relation to wastewater, neither water reuse nor recovery of energy and nutrients has achieved large-scale application in Europe. There are a number of market failures and barriers that currently prevent water reuse and recovery of energy and use of nutrients from wastewater. So what our analysis found is that, okay, the problem exists, and not only does the problem exist, but actually the EU knows that the problem exists, and yet the problem persists. So that's kind of a very interesting dynamic. So the problem has been identified not only by local actors and people like, for example, like Amy and Nova, who are partners within Houseful, but even at the EU scale, this problem is recognized, and yet the problem continues. So these are the sorts of kind of easy wins that the EU should be pushing for in the coming years, where they've clearly already identified the problem and maybe some solutions. For what it's worth, within Houseful, of course, we also put forward our own potential solutions. So here, for example, for the reuse of wastewater, here are 4 solutions that we put forward. We're not saying that these solutions, if implemented, would be the panacea and would be the silver bullet we need to completely make sure that our water system becomes, 100% circular or anything like that. We're just saying that if used, these solutions have the potential to at least improve the current situation. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, there are around 80 policy recommendations coming from the report that we hopefully will be published on our website in the coming days or weeks. But just to let you know that there is another publication which I think is going live either today or tomorrow, which is a best practices book coming from the project. So that gives you a good overview of the different solutions we used, but also looks at kind of maybe some of the really top priorities in terms of policy recommendations. And it also outlines some financing schemes that could be used for replication of Houseful type circular solutions. So I'm not going to go through all of the policy recommendations. I would encourage you to read the report that's going to be published today or tomorrow, and then in a few weeks' time, hopefully the much longer report, which goes into far more detail. But here are some of the solutions we put forward. So, for example, the need for a project funding database or agencies. So one of the things that came back to us from our conversations was that even people who are interested in becoming more circular, building owners, or whoever that might be, there's this gap in their knowledge. So they don't know where they should be looking in order to access financing. And that's clearly a huge barrier that exists to the use of circular solutions, where people have the will to try and act and do things differently, but there's this gap between them and the people who have the information or have the financing that they need to get access to in order to progress their projects. Again, here's some more. I won't go through all of them. Maybe I'll pick out one, the idea of an EU recovered materials agency. So again, an agency at the EU level that would be responsible for example, working with common construction materials and building materials which are used in buildings today. I know that these typologies are very different across member states. So, for example, a building in Northern Europe might not have the same materials or the same needs as a building in Southern Europe, for example. So, in any case, this agency could be leading in terms of testing those materials, testing their reusability, and kind of thinking outside the box in terms of how we can give value back to existing building materials. Again, a few more. One of the issues maybe I'd pick out there would be number 9, which is to put greater circularity within public procurement guidelines. Now, in fairness, that's something that the EU is currently thinking about, modifying its current public procurement guidelines so that they are more green. But that's something that kind of we should definitely be pushing from to make sure that it gets over the line. Again, another one that maybe I'll pick out, number 12, I think is quite important, which is the lighthouse circular building. So one thing that we found when we had all these conversations with people was that when you have a local area where you want to do something like Houseful, there's this huge knowledge gap. There's also a huge skills gap. So for example, if you're trying to develop a circular renovation project, if you're a public building, you might put that contract out for tender. But the problem is that if you're the private company that might be tendering for a typical renovation project, you might look at what's proposed and think, okay, look, there's too much uncertainty here for me. The potential for cost overruns, as far as I'm concerned, is much higher than a typical renovation project. And as a result, I'm not going to tender. And that basically means that either public contracts, they don't receive offers, or they receive much fewer offers, which then means that the cost can be much higher. So one of the things that we found is that when you do have local examples of these circular buildings, that really removes a lot of the skepticism and the kind of knowledge gap that local professionals are working with. And it can help to kind of assure them about the potential risks of these kind of projects. And then, yeah, like I said, remove that knowledge gap, which is a huge barrier that exists at the moment in the EU. Again, I won't go through these. Number 14, the co-creation templates. I think Beatrice will mention this in her presentation after me, so I'll leave that here. Number 18, something the EU is currently pushing quite a lot, is the use of its levels framework. So again, that's kind of a framework where you can use it, any project can use it to try and assess the circularity and environmental sustainability of their building. And what the EU is hoping is that if this common framework gets adopted across Europe, that it really can help to speed up the transmission of best practices between different member states. Something I should also mention very, very briefly, because I realize I'm running out of time, is that last week we had an event where we tried to bring together different social housing providers who are working on the circular economy, very actively working on the social economy, with the EU. So we tried to make a bridging event between the local level and the EU level, which is something that probably doesn't happen too often, unfortunately. And again, this is one of many webinars and other events that we had to try and engage as many stakeholders and get their perspectives on the different challenges. Just for in 2 or 3 slides, I'll say that the EU, of course, is aware of many of the challenges that currently exist. Some of you may have seen that they published just very recently the transition pathway for construction, which really kind of outlines the EU's perspective, at least in terms of how we get towards a more sustainable, greener and digital kind of construction ecosystem. When it comes to the circular economy, they outlined a number of barriers that they see at the moment, which is kind of a lack of regulatory requirements, a lack of standards for secondary building materials, unfavorable market conditions or financing, and then difficulty in comparing different construction products. Something which we'll mention in the final session of today in our panel discussion, but something that's worth just noting quickly, is that the construction products regulation is up for review at the moment, and it proposes to make the construction products far more transparent in terms of labeling, their embedded carbon, their repairability, recyclability, and so on. So basically the EU is hoping to use labeling to increase the knowledge of consumers and make sure they make more informed decisions when buying construction products, and that hopefully it can help us to make more circular decisions when we engage with suppliers. And I won't go into all of this because it's quite detailed, but the EU has also just very recently published the first draft of what it calls the Delegated Act for the environmental taxonomy. So for those of you who don't know, the environmental taxonomy is an EU framework which effectively says which investments are truly environmentally sustainable and which investments aren't. So if a particular activity, if let's say you're an investor and someone says, okay, buy my bond because my bond is a green bond and I'm going to use that money to invest in environmentally sustainable activities. We know that greenwashing was a huge phenomenon. It still is a huge phenomenon, but at least now with the environmental taxonomy, it forbids people from labeling certain activities as being green, or at least aligned with the taxonomy, and therefore, in theory, should better direct private investment towards truly environmentally sustainable activities. Up until now, the circular economy wasn't really covered by the taxonomy, but now going forward it will be, and that would include trying to direct more financing towards projects that are truly circular in nature. So the summary is here, but I think the key message I want to say is that, okay, challenges exist. Projects like Houseful help us to better identify those challenges and maybe also some potential solutions. But importantly, as we've shown throughout the project, is that Houseful is part of a growing movement. So together we can continue to highlight the issues that exist and hopefully collectively push for better outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dara. So now it's the turn of Bea Medina from WMB. She will share with us the lessons learned from the co-creating process in Houseful.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this presentation now is about one of the transversal actions that Houseful project has adopted through an open innovation action through co-creation. My name is Beatriz Medina. I work for WMB. We are a consultancy company based in Barcelona, and we conduct socio-environmental studies, both at academic sector, but also we implement those also at in international settings. And well, my background is in socio-environmental sciences, and in Houseful we have been coordinating this transversal action called co-creation for engagement. But also we have conducted also societal studies aiming at learning how these key stakeholders and tenants have conducted also or perceived circular economy solutions in the housing sector, and what leads towards the adoption of circular economy in their daily life. But talking about the outcomes of these societal learnings might take a day. So today I focus the presentation on the lessons that we have addressed through implementing the co-creation process. So the aim of this short presentation is to see how we have supported the development of the Houseful solutions by getting the participation of the relevant stakeholders on the table. It might sound like a very a quick question, but it's really difficult to be addressed because it has been 5 years of doing a lot of activities. So I'll try to condense and be very concise on lessons that can be taken from other projects or for following ups for these projects in case they want to address also co-creation. But anyway, I might not be the right person to address lessons because I've been facilitating this whole process. Maybe the right people that could really address those lessons are the ones that has been collaborated in this process. And yeah, maybe we have to take a step back first in trying to see what was co-creation for Houseful. Co-creation is set on the Open Innovation Science Scheme that now European Commission projects are really pushing forward, having that into the science sector. So in the co-creation, the users of the knowledge generated through science are not anymore considered users, but they are also agents producing the knowledge, and they have the right through a more participative democracy to participate in sciences. And that's how we have done this through the different Houseful activities. But how we did it? So it's not any kind of failure that has been done through a big effort from the Houseful consortium. And one has to say also that in particular the demo site coordinators in Houseful, we had 4 demo sites building, and they were coordinated by some specific partners in the project, and they were the ones really making a lot of efforts in knocking doors, addressing tenants, addressing key stakeholders, and try to get them on board all the time. Sometimes this one of the key ingredients that are mostly hidden in the co-creation actions, that it needs a lot of resources, a lot of people at the same time doing a lot of work, even sending emails, even going door to door, even phoning the tenants, phoning the key stakeholders. That needs resources, and a lot of resources, and time dedication for that people involved. Then also during these 5 years of the co-creation actions, we have developed a lot of activities, 9 different types of questionnaires addressing like hundreds of recipients answering those questionnaires. We have conducted 63 focus groups and interviews, which is kind of a really crazy amount of activities, a lot of co-creation sessions, the monthly meetings within the consortium, strategic workshops within the consortium, even capacity building sessions for specific audiences like the tenants, open visits. And then finally, we got until having 13 co-creation ideas developed. This needs another key ingredient, that was the collective intelligence, not only by the experts like the academic sector or the organizations more experienced in circular economy, but also the indigenous knowledge from any source of interested or relevant people that has a right to say something on how their solutions could be implemented in their buildings or in the neighborhood. So that was another key ingredient. And then also about the how. Of course, it was addressed by a systematic approach. Without that, we can lose the north, and we cannot know where we are and where we are going. We adopted a method that I'm not going to go into the detail of that because it's called backcasting exercise. In the first round of workshops, before a deeply contextual analysis, we come into trying to identify how people would like to have their circular housings in 2030. So we have those future visions by the stakeholders, and we work towards that idea by identifying co-creation ideas through Houseful and implementing those co-creation ideas over the period of time. And then
Bea, we don't hear you anymore. We can still see your screen, but we cannot hear you.
sorry, I was having some problems, some technical problems, but now I'm back. Yeah, so yes, sorry, now can you hear me and see me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Sorry for that. Yeah, well then I was talking about another key ingredient that was the systematic approach and the co-creation ideas that what needs to be developed through the project lifetime. So I'm not going to the detail of specifically what was created, but there was also something that happens when we started developing the strategy that Carolina mentioned before, was that we plan a lot of activities and doing face-to-face and trying to engage with the stakeholders. And then it couldn't happen because we have the COVID pandemic. So we have to readapt a lot all the strategy and try to afford some mixed method analysis by having the other key ingredient, that is flexibility in co-creation, is something that is very much needed, not because it can happen in another pandemic, but also many things can happen at the time, delays due to the bureaucracy situations, because having these refurbishment processes and renovation, it's not only depending on the timing of the project, it's also depending on many, many other factors. So flexibility was kind of a key ingredient on developing the co-creation after trying to have this systemic approach. So then yes, the other thing that we didn't talk, and we don't have time to really think about the context of the different demo site buildings that we have, they matters because each of them were differently approached. Each of them has different situation, context, timings, delays, problems, people interested, people not interested, people that we were trying to address. So each of them have a different situation. Just going into the different two type of housing models that Houseful had. We have the social housing models in 3 of the demo site buildings with a rental scheme in some of them, with vulnerable communities involved. And on the other hand, we have also a demo site that was addressing mostly the a cooperative model that was the commune community. So there was a difference on how we address this co-creation in one particular building to another. So what has been co-created? A lot of things, I must say, but we embed all of this into the co-creation ideas. They were firstly identified, prioritized, developed, and evaluated. And they could be organized into the different thematic groupings that we have tried to organize because we have to embed in our workflow of the project. And also in the different demo sites, there weren't the same needs. So some of them were developed in some of the demo sites, some others in the other. And then they come up into a long list. They are not even all the list of outputs that we have developed through all these co-creation actions, training protocols, a lot of communication actions, info points developed together with the stakeholders, also new alliances, governance models, networks of social supporters, podcasts, videos, trainings, so different type of activities that were trying to address the stakeholders and tenants' needs. So just at the very beginning, I mentioned that we addressed this backcasting exercise. And the first exercise we have to do, both online and offline, due to the COVID restrictions, is that we have to thought about what are those backcasted futures, how people would like to live. And we come up with some key ingredients of that dream that the stakeholders have in the near future on how the building should be. And they are, some of them commented here. They are mostly a kind of a summary of all of them. But just going into some of them is basically relevant, that there should be a network community. Buildings have to be self-sufficient with no more waste, only resources that are following this cycle. The intelligent monitoring of maintenance of systems. This new house model about having aesthetics, inclusivity, and sustainability together. So it should also address vulnerable communities or low-income neighborhoods, so they also should be on board. Having this user-centered approach, comfort being a priority, and also having the dream of having the regulatory framework ready and a coordinated public administration. So working toward that backcasted futures, one has to make assumptions on how Houseful has to be worked. And we developed also these co-creation ideas based on these assumptions. One of them could be that the complexity is addressed, or that there is community cohesion, and maybe we have to work towards that during in the different demo sites. So there were different assumptions that we have to afford during these co-creation activities. And who was in this process and who wasn't? We have developed an extensive stakeholder analysis through 3 deliverables with a stakeholder map. So I'm not going into the detail of that, but basically we can divide these 2 audiences into the key stakeholders, so the organizations, the ones that could really have time to devote and be participating into the workshops, and then the tenants. So those cooperative, young, vulnerable communities, large families participating into the actions we require when they might not have time to do that, but some of them participated. And then, yes, we also have identified what are the factors for effective engagement in previous deliverables. You might know some of them, but basically they are being like, there should be representativeness of stakeholders, for that we make this stakeholder analysis, early engagement, continuity, and long term. So we work over the 5 periods of project. again, this resource allocation that I talked before. And to be honest, we didn't manage to address all what was requested because we didn't manage to have resources for everything. Having effective communication, adaptive to the housing model that we have, being clear on the goal of engagement. So those are the factors. So just coming to the end of this presentation. This final recipe after doing co-creation in Houseful is a mix of a lot of different things, both psychological things, also logistical things, and also some methodological. But basically, it's having a systemic approach so that in the whole co-creation, not just having a bunch of different activities and not really organized, having flexibility in mind because pitfalls might happen and we have to deal with them. Also having a kind of a mixed methods, and after the pandemic, we really understood that having a combination of online and offline session is something really powerful, like today's session, and people is now very much used to connect to Zoom, even in their mobiles, or answer online surveys, or participating through online, but also basics. It's like when coming back into face-to-face, you can really engage and deep on the thoughts. Then contextualize, because context matters, having resources again. So allocating resources for co-creation activities is really a need. Otherwise, it cannot really take place in a broader scope. Take into account the needs of the tenants or the citizens or the individuals involved in these projects, because they are not working like us for an organization, having their working time to work or participate in the workshop. So you have to take into account this availability, even promote incentives, keep motivation alive. We are passionate about that. We work for the good of the environment. We have that passion, and we have to transfer that into all the stakeholders we are addressing. And then remember that previous slide about the effective engagement factors, so put them on board. That's the end of this presentation. Of course, there's much more information in the different deliverables that they are going to be published. So here there are some links. We already have made some publications, and there will be more relevant information in those deeper deliverables. But in any case, that was kind of an overview on how co-creation takes place. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brianna. So now it's the turn of Albert Torres from IRIS. He will show us the digital platform developed in the Houseful project to help housing stakeholders work together.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you see the screen properly?
Yes, also.
Perfect. Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here supporting and helping the Houseful project. So my name is Albert, and I'm coming from IRIS. We are an SME engineering company based in Barcelona. Our main business is linked to improve quality control of production processes. But then it's true as well that we have an area of participation in European projects in which then we apply other let's say, areas. And in that case, this is the contribution from the digital area in which we have been able during these 5 years to develop a digital platform that we want to present to you. And we want to encourage all the attendants today, which I can see there are quite many, to all register and to try to contribute into that new community that's supposed to be alive and contributing post-project with all the ambitions and objectives of the project. So today the idea is to talk about the new digital platform to keep housing stakeholders to work together. As we have been seeing from Carolina, from Marta, and well from the other presenters, there are some issues related to the housing sector that we need to understand, we need to know, and we want to share with you in order to better understand why the digital platform has become alive. So buildings are responsible for the 40% of the EU energy consumption, and then buildings are the single largest energy consumer in Europe, and heating and cooling and domestic hot water account for the 80% of the energy that the citizens consume. All these facts are let's say, enough strong, in my opinion, to try to make sure that the circular buildings are the major opportunity for a sustainable future for Europe, right? And digitization, it comes as a factor here, and that's the reason we have created the Houseful platform, an interactive sharing platform for circular building services. The platform is alive. You can access to it through the website of the project. You can access to it as well through this domain. And this has been a work that we have been doing from different years of the project in order to define and detect from the different stakeholders that we have participated actively in the project to better understand which will be the perfect tools that will allow us to have, let's say, a digital platform that will be used and will be useful for potential stakeholders, right? That's the reason what we have created is a digital platform, as we're commenting, that we want to be post-project alive, and that's the commitment that from Iris side we have as a post-project, let's say, exploitation or service for the community. It's a platform that when you will log in, you will see that has different sections and different functionalities. Here it's a list of them, but mainly what we want to encourage with the registry is to keep the community alive. As Beatriz was commenting, to keep the community alive and motivated for contributing and sharing information and best practices among the different stakeholders, that's the most important. Of course, nowadays there are different ways of contacting to people. Of course, we have LinkedIn as a major stakeholder, but we have detected that sometimes we don't have the proper environment or ecosystem, virtual ecosystem to connect, to share, and to learn from each other. That's the reason we have created Houseful as a first one-stop shop floor for that community, in which you will be able, in an easy way, to share news, articles, and information. There is an interactive directory in which once you're registered, you will be able to chat and to identify different stakeholders from different regions in Europe, and with a search engine for keywords, for services, for materials. Then we have the stakeholders map, which is like a marketplace of materials, services related to circular buildings, in which now maybe you will register and you will see that it's almost empty. That's the reason we encourage everyone to generate this critical mass and content inside the platform. Then we have a couple of other interesting functionalities that are more linked to experts, which is one is developed together with ITEC and IWASOL, which is the circularity tool, which is a tool that allows to anyone who is going to be building a new building or has already an existing building to gather all the technical information of the building and get some results of the circularity of that building, to better understand which are the critical parameters of that building in order to improve the circularity. Then we have as well, thanks to the demo sites and as well other partners like Cartif, we have been able to connect the demo buildings to the platform, and the tenants and the owners of that demo buildings will be able then to monitor in real time their certain key parameters of comfort or inside their own houses, and in order to identify, for instance, temperature and other indicators, in order to better understand if the comfort of the building it's according to expectations. All this is made inside the Houseful platform, and I think I've been saying already many reasons why you should register, right? So I think to be part of a circular building community is one of the main ones. To be inspired maybe from these demo buildings in order to better understand if that actions can be replicated in other places. To discover local and regional international companies, technologies, key actors from the circular housing value chain with the marketplace, the stakeholders map. To assess the circularity of a building. To offer or request products and services in the housing sector, to better understand who is who in the circular housing ecosystem, and to bring solutions to this circular model. Of course, that is an experience of 5 years projects of trusted partners, and you will be able to contact them as well if you need support into that. We believe that after the project, we've seen as well a lot of changes in policy and in recommendations from the EU. I think Dara has been already commenting some of them, but EU has established a legislative framework already that includes that energy performance of buildings will be a must in the future. Actually, past week I was in another meeting of clean energy transition in Brussels, and we were discussing with some policy advisors that the new framework for the construction of new buildings will be really strict in terms of circularity and in terms of energy savings and energy efficiency. So I believe all of us, in a way, has a way to contribute into that, because we can reduce the use of resources, we can recover and recycle a lot of the potential products that we are using, and we can produce high quality new products, for instance, like quality biogas or compost production from different technologies that exist. This has been some of the technologies that we have been in Houseful, and you find inside the platform. And we encourage all of you to try to become part of this map that appears in the website in order to publish and public make available any of the offers or requests that you may have. Finally, just to comment that this has been an approach that has been running, of course, during the Houseful project during 5 years. And I think the fact of having demonstrated in 4 demo cases is the proof that it can work and it can be replicated, which is one of the challenges that we have. And we expect that as well, to be able to share that information and bring that in value into digital form will encourage and will motivate others to replicate it and to repeat it. That's it from my side. Thanks for watching, and we hope to find you registered in the platform. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Marta, who wants to be the presenter now? Who I should change?
No, I don't think we need any more presenter. So you can just not share your screen.
Okay.
Okay, so now if there is anybody who has a question, either for Carolina, Dara, Bea, or Bert, there's something you would like to ask, you can unmute yourself, or you can also use the questions, the chat, to ask specific questions. Or if you have something to comment, it doesn't have to be a question itself, or something that you think that if you know any other solution or technology. Definitely, presentations were really clear. So,
hello, this is Carolina. If we don't have any question, maybe I can ask questions to our audience. We will also like to hear from you about your experiences in this kind of circular projects or circular technologies, and what kind of barriers have you encountered. If there's anything that you want to mention to us and to the whole audience, and that we haven't mentioned in our presentations. Okay.
yes, Mariana Marchetti.
Okay, I'm mute. Yes, I can speak now.
Yeah, you can speak now.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I work also on the circular economy, starting from technological innovation with housing association, but working with residents they, at least in London, in the group that I engage with, they express a preference on looking way to save resources in their neighborhood. So they express the wishes to have innovation like Library of Things, Repair Cafe, way to reduce waste that they produce in their daily life at the community level, an opportunity for working at a community level. So I moved from the technical innovation to social innovation, looking at how circular economy can be implemented from this point of view, how citizens and housing community can contribute in saving resources, reducing waste, through intervention that are mainly social innovation. They are product markets process that help engage people in a change of practice while address their personal needs and help and satisfy and are able to provide economic, environmental, and social benefit. So my experience was different, but I believe that they can be complementary, because what I saw in the literature that in order to achieve full sustainability, so that is also it also applied to the circular economy, we should combine social and technical innovation. So I'm extremely interested to try to look at both and try to combine together, so engaging people in solutions that are social as well as the technical innovation.
Thank you, Mariano.
And maybe I would like to ask a few questions, because in your experience with housing association, you focus on technology, and your residents how your residents were engaged in this process of technical innovation? You discussed about the co-creation, and I also focus on co-creation for social innovation. So I was wondering if more about your experience of co-creation in technical innovation, apart from engaging them in needs and understanding their preference. If you were able also to engage in developing a solution or testing solution.
I might answer to that, if you're okay.
Yes.
Well, we basically address what the audience wanted to co-create. We didn't push to any type of technological co-creation. At the grant preparation, the idea was to develop the Houseful solutions together with the stakeholders. But as we wanted to develop a bottom-up approach, asking the audience what are the ideas that the Houseful solutions has to address, basically, one can understand that if they reach consensus during the deliberation process of the workshops, normally what happens is like they try to address ideas or identify ideas to be co-created based on a common expertise of the audience. If we reach a wide or multiple stakeholders, the multi-stakeholder approach, then the collective intelligence is more on transversal issues rather than on specific focus. So there weren't any type of specific people working on water, or specific people working on waste that they can really co-create on one of the specific solutions. Therefore, the co-creation ideas that were prioritized and highlighted to be developed were based on the collective intelligence of the audience. And they were basically addressing transversal things like governance actions, training, communications. But this wasn't our decision. It was taken by the co-creation process following the bottom-up approach. That's why we didn't address technological, even though there was one specific co-creation idea addressing the materials, and that was addressed at a very technological audience, where we held webinars and validations through that technical audience, but the others were basically focusing transversal actions. So it wasn't our choice.
Okay, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yes. So I have a totally different experience in co-creation and engagement participant in developing a social innovation intervention by co-creation, but it was not easy process. So I was wondering. It's interesting. Thank you for clarification.
The other thing that I would like to add to this is that once you are already within a project and you already have a path to follow and certain technologies to develop, it's quite different if you want to create a co-creation with a community and to decide how to rebuild, how to use certain tools, etc., how you want to rehabilitate your building, because you don't have the restraints that you had within the project. If someone comes and says, okay, instead of this, we want to do all that thing, it's not contemplated within this kind of scope that we have. It's quite different when you do co-creation completely free and within a framework as we did.
Yes, I understand. Yes.
That's why we also have to follow certain lines. We have to change those lines because you encounter problems and limitation, etc. But we had to try to stay as close as possible to our initial idea, because we want to achieve certain scope also. It's unfortunate for us when we had to change that. Yes.
Maybe I'll just say a few words from the point of view of Housing Europe, because of course we represent housing associations and cooperative housing groups across Europe. So the issues that you mentioned, of course, are felt quite broadly across different countries and different projects. Things that we find, though, that are helpful, if you can use that word, is that you need to kind of think about your target audience as much as possible. So if you're dealing, let's say, primarily with older people or with lower income people and so on, what are their needs? What are their wants? So, you know, maybe what they want is that their home is affordable and is of a good quality. So that needs to be the way in which you frame your argument as much as possible. So if you go to these people and say, you know, by adopting this approach, we can save a certain number of tons of carbon over the life cycle of the building, more than likely you've lost that audience immediately. You have to say, if we adopt this approach, we think we can reduce your electricity bills or your water bills by a certain amount of euros per month or per year, and then you're really kind of speaking their language. So it's really how you frame the argument when you're trying to gate these co-creation processes, and make sure that it's always tailored for the interests and the kind of hierarchy of needs of the people you're engaging with. The other thing that I just mentioned very quickly is that we know from research, but also from very practical experience of projects we work on, is that when new technologies are being used, people really prefer that those new technologies kind of don't disrupt their life too much. So a good example would be if you have a mobile phone, and then, I don't know, you upgrade to the next model of the mobile phone, there's a continuity. So the new product should be a better performing product than the older product, but in terms of how it works and the technological processes and so on, and the basic provision of services that it gives you, it should be fairly comparable. Right? If you change from a mobile phone to some piece of technology that is completely unrelated, then maybe that's where you get difficulties and where people kind of start to push back against you. So you have to try and always think, how can the upgrade be as seamless as possible, and how can we work within the parameters and knowledge that people already have when we're implementing these types of solutions.
Yes, interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wanted to add something else before we close this first part? Alan?
Hello, can you hear me, Marta?
Yes.
Hi, Marta. I'm going to ask Dara some questions, not just because he's a fellow Irish guy by the sounds of his accent. But hiya, Dara. My name is Alan Martin Redmond. I work at CSTB here in France. I just finished working with Marta on a proposal. My questions, I think I have two questions for you. One is regards to that technology aspect. I'll start with that. I believe if you use certain elements of technology, it helps. I believe if you use social network analytics, which I have experience of using in Canada when we linked it to like a virtual model, we were able to get people's perspective. I mean, the masses of the people for their different neighborhoods to actually use things like Twitter and things like that. We were able to use algorithms such as Wayfinder to find out what their feelings were for that specific area and how the urban development and the planning stages were being unfolded by using social network analytics. So I really think we are technological by default, and it really is how we use it to our best advantages. The other question is kind of more to do with the policies aspect. I was very impressed by your presentation. Again, not just because you're Irish, but the key thing I was looking at is that you mentioned something. I think you had 80 recommendations after this 60-month project, which is really cool. But just to put it in layman's terms, so did you look at other kind of policies exist to build on this, or did you just test it on something? And then what I'm trying to think, you mentioned that the EU will be bringing out a procurement route. In my background of construction, like and my experience as well as working in the UK, the Office of Government Commerce in the UK, like they have several stages, 7 stages that they actually link to the RIBA stages as well. And they have then the stages at the very end of like, it's kind of the use of the building at the end, and they link that to certain guidelines. I think they have about 5 guidelines, and one of them is sustainable development. But what they have in that is kind of like a specific guide on deconstruction and how you can reduce costs by using deconstruction. So if you start this at the very beginning of the stage of your housing development or so forth, you're able to look at where the materials would be for their second life, in this aspect. So really my question to you is that something that you think will be coming from the household project for deconstruction aspect, and will that be brought into the procurement route with Europe? Will they look at the UK, what they do, or internationally as well? Is that something that you think they'll do?
Okay, so thanks for the questions. We mentioned kind of using Twitter and other kind of, let's say, online algorithms and kind of platforms that that people can use to engage, and indeed you can engage quite a broad audience. I think what's interesting. So to give you one quick anecdote, a couple of weeks ago I was in Valencia for an event about energy communities, and some very simple thing. We wanted to get feedback from people who had attended the event, so we put up a QR code all over the venue and said, scan the QR code, take 3 minutes to give us your feedback. But what we didn't consider was that actually a lot of people who attended the event were much older people, and actually, despite the fact we've lived through COVID, where I thought QR codes have become completely normalized for everybody, there was still a big section of people who attended that event who didn't give us their feedback because they weren't comfortable using QR codes and the kind of the digital survey technique that we had set up for that event. And they kind of said to us, well, can we not just write something down on paper, going completely analog with it? So I think digital platforms work, but maybe you're also excluding some people who are a little bit less digitally literate, and that's kind of something that should always be considered. In terms of the disassembly, I mean, I could talk to you all day about that. It's a really interesting topic. I think one thing that might be interesting on this is, so I mentioned that the EU has just set out draft guidelines for the circular economy in terms of its green taxonomy, the environmental taxonomy. I don't think disassembly is currently specifically mentioned within that, or at least not directly, but I think it could over time become a vehicle to promote the disassembly of different components. We're going to have another session in a few moments with a representative from the construction products sector, so maybe he can talk a bit more about that. But I know that within the housing sector, at least, we're seeing far more projects that are using plug and play elements, modular elements. Part of that is for environmental reasons, but part of it is also for cost reasons. So if you're doing purely modular build, the theory at least is that there'll be less wastage, and also that the modular elements can be clicked into place much more quickly, and you can have greater savings. in the current climate of much higher construction costs, I think we're really now going to see a huge push in the coming years towards those more modular plug and play elements, which then obviously are more aligned with future disassembly, future reuse, recycling, and so on. So I think it's a natural progression, yeah, that we're going to see going.
Okay, thank you there. The only thing is, like, keep in mind that construction now and probably in the future will be based on renovation. So modular will take some kind of aspect, but it will be renovation that we have to look at if we're truly going to be environmentally friendly. I mean, the very least we should look at is building on brownfield sites, but not to keep on doing new builds. But with houses, of course, it's that we don't have a supply of them, so it is new build. So I take in consideration what you said, and I think it was a very good response. With regards to digital, you're completely right about that. It really depends on the genre. The only thing is, what we have existing at the moment is person going into a council and looking at, you know, a map or plans. They actually linked in kind of these digital models to a digital virtual model. So people could go online, see the virtual model itself, and then click comments on it. And then these comments, all the comments were gathered together to see what was the problem. So there was issues like in their area, if there was an infrastructure being built beside them, they were complaining how this planning would affect that. Problems with how the building was facing, because everything's glass in Toronto, you know, how this would cause problems on them as well. It was quite good, but I mean, it was what I'm trying to, I guess, allude you to. It was better than what exists to date. It's not the perfect answer, because as you said, the older generation isn't kind of, you know, tech savvy. But what I'm saying is, you know, we are digital by default, and we can use it to a certain degree to reach better than what we have at the moment. But again, it's not the answer. But thank you for your comments, Dara. They're excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in order to finish sharp on time to get to the roundtable, I would just like to thank you, the project partners, for their presentations. And for the rest, I would like to encourage you to follow this path, no, to a more circular economy in the building and housing sector. We hope that you'll find inspirational, no, not only the technologies, but also like everything that we have explained. And as Dara said, that this is housing is a growing movement. We really encourage you to foster it, and as Bea also said, to keep the motivation alive. That's something that we all need to do. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, I would also like to add, before we go into the next session, since we have a few more minutes, that since we work, this is a final verb for a research project, and this is also something that I would like to mention, since I come from the industry. I used to work in construction, and there is also a gap that we have to cover a little better, which is the transition from the projects into the full implementation. I know that at this part we're doing innovation and research, and we are talking about demonstrations and pilot plans, but there is also a gap sometimes when we had to further develop this, and I don't ever like to see this just stopping here. I like to see this going further and really get it into the commercial level and having this implemented in longer scale, and which is a different kind of challenge. And just I want to just add another anecdote. I used to work in promotion, road recycling, with commercial technologies, which was not research. And even when promoting that, the only things that really engage the public officials to try the recycling process on the roads was the economic advantage. And it doesn't matter the savings on materials or in the environment. The final decision, the bottom line, is mostly economic in many cases. I think we also, from the research point of view, we have to start working more on justifying the bottom line on the economics to really help push these ideas, and not to fall after these pilot plans or demonstrations and not reach the full economic potential on commercial level. Thank you, everyone, and we will continue directly with our second part. Dara will be the moderator for this section. Do you want to take over, Dara?
Yeah, sure, but maybe if possible, give people 5 minutes just to stretch their legs or do whatever they need to do, and we can begin in 5 minutes if that works for everybody.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So see you in 5 minutes. Okay, so the time is just gone 4 o'clock, so we can get back into it. So our next session, what we're trying to do basically is really hear from people outside of the Houseful project, people who are really expert in the different areas of circular economy that we've engaged with over the course of the project. So we're going to hear from 2 speakers who are really, let's say, industry experts who can help to put the work that we've done in Houseful on a much broader context. So while of course we can be very proud of the work that we've done on this project over 5 years, and it's been a monumental amount of work done by a number of people, it's good to kind of maybe leave our bubble a little bit sometimes and kind of try to see, okay, how far or how representative is the type of work that we're doing in reality? I mean, how far along the road to a more circular built environment are we really? So hopefully our next two speakers can give us that dose of reality that we need and kind of let us know about the challenges, but also the opportunities that we can expect over the coming years. So I have two speakers. I'll introduce them as they speak. So the first speaker is Milo Fisconaro, who is the Executive Director at Acqua Pubblica Europea, which is the European Association of Public Water Operators. Acqua Pubblica unites publicly owned water and sanitation services and other stakeholders working to promote public water management at both European and international level. It is an operator-led association that looks for efficient solutions that serve public interests. And Milo brings a wealth of experience to today's conversation as he's worked at Acqua Pubblica since 2012. So Milo, you don't have a visual presentation, so I let you speak for 10-15 minutes and give us your thoughts about where we are in terms of meeting the challenge of a more circular system of water management.
Thanks a lot, Dara. I hope that you are hearing me well.
Yes, perfectly.
Yes, so. Great, thanks. Well, thanks again, Dara, and thanks to you and to Houseful Project for involving us in this final conference. Actually, the second time that I have the pleasure to talk in the framework of Houseful Project. Very interesting for us here from your experience, and looking forward also to future exchange on this topic. As you were saying, Dara, I represent Acqua Pubblica Europea, which is a network of public water utilities, public water operators at the European level. Water operators. So water operators are those entity, industries, utilities that take water from nature and bring it to our houses and businesses after treating it to ensure that it is safe for drinking water consumption and for other uses that we might have in our houses. And then they also, water utilities, they also take the used water, the water that we, after we have used it in our houses and businesses, and they treat it again to ensure that we can return the water to the environment without risk of pollution and deterioration of our ecosystems. So this is the job of our members. Then they are public, as Dara was saying, which means that our members, they don't have private shareholder, they don't distribute profits to private shareholders. We are really a public service. So when coming to talk about circularity, at least from our point of view, well, let me start by saying something that is very obvious, but maybe sometimes it's also worth saying obvious things. That is, the water cycle itself is an example of natural circularity in our environment. Water evaporates from plants, from animals, from human beings, from the ecosystems to go to the sky, and then falls back in the form of rain and snow. If we are talking about circularity in terms of policy making and solutions, it's because we are trying to find solution to the fact that we alter the natural cycle of water through our usage, through our pollution that we produce, and so we need some way to restore the naturality of things. This just to to frame the issue of from our point of view in terms of water management. Concretely, the fact that the system has been altered and we have problems with water, here in this context I will mention two main issues. One is the problem of saving water, and in particular good quality of water. We are running out of water for many reasons that you might be aware of, and so we have a duty and the need to keep very good quality water for drinking water purposes and other uses that are needed for our society that are essential, and maybe use different quality of water for other uses. The typical example that everybody makes here is the fact that using high quality drinking water for flushing our toilets, maybe it's not the best way to manage our resource. But there are many other examples. And then there is an issue also with our wastewater. Well, we have different issues there with the wastewater, but one of the things that we need to look into it is the fact that for how our systems are built, basically we used to treat wastewater through centralized treatment plants. So we collect all wastewater in one point, we treat it, and we then give it back to the nature. When we do so, sometimes the treatment is not enough to remove all pollution, one thing, and then we have a specific problem when it rains a lot. When it rains a lot, apart from having the risk of flooding, there is also the issue that the treatment plant is not working properly, and so we release a lot of pollution into our rivers and sea after a strong rain event. For both of these problems, there are and for many others, but specifically for these ones, normally we have two kinds of solutions. We have the so-called gray solutions, traditional gray solution, based on plants or concrete, to put it simple, and then the so-called nature-based solution that is going back to the natural capacity of nature to address our problems that we create in terms of pollution or other things. And nature-based solutions have two powerful benefits compared to gray solution. One, they are normally less expensive, and secondly, they are also they produce less CO2 emission and they need less energy. So some of the solutions that have been developed and explored in your project are really promising from our point of view, because they help on one hand to reduce the consumption of good quality of water, and then they also address some of the problems related to the treatment and the management of wastewater. So for us, it's really some of the solutions that you are working on, they really represent the future. And this is certainly the direction we need to go to. The point is how to get there, because there are also some challenges in reaching this to reaching this future. At least from our point of view, the problem here regarding some of the solutions that you were discussing and you worked on is not really technical feasibility, but it's more in terms of, let's say, of governance and let's say the political management of this solution. Let me try to explain this. Maybe I'm getting a bit technical here, but I think it's important to understand that some of the things that some of the way we manage traditionally water resources, and also why it's not so easy to move to another model. Essentially, from our point of view, the fact is that most of the costs related to water resource management, and in particular to the provision of drinking water and to wastewater treatment, are fixed costs, in the sense that they are related to our assets, to the network, and the fact that if you start to disconnect people, households, buildings from the network partially, so a group of households is disconnected and they have in situ within the building solution to address the problem of the water, well, we still have more or less the same cost to manage that will be redistributed across a smaller population, a smaller number of users, which then will have to pay more for the same kind of services, because essentially the base you distribute the cost on is a smaller one, and which also means that if we assume that some of the solution that promote circularity in buildings are especially for new buildings or for retrofitting or existing building demanding investments, you might end up in a situation where Those who don't have this solution are typically elderly people living in older buildings, or poorer people that have not the capacity to finance the investments for the upgrade of their buildings. So essentially, you tend to have regressive effects on, I mean, some of the solution, if not implemented at the same time for all, and this is a real challenge, you might end up in a situation where are the poorer ones that pay more for keeping with the old system. Hence, the importance of public authorities that lead the transition, the importance of having consistent and fair policies that also pay attention to the redistribution of the costs, and also the importance of public authorities and political power in general to intervene directly in provision of some services, like Housing Europe is doing, the members at least. So this is a bit to give you an overview of the perspective we have on some of the issues that you are working on in the Houseful project, which again, I insist is really promising. I think the next step would be, at least from our perspective, how to build together with you, with the experts, but with other stakeholders, and particularly with public authorities, a path toward this future that ensure that everybody is moving together without leaving people behind just because they don't have the means for the investment that are needed. Maybe I stop here. I didn't mention how this evolution is inscribed in the evolution also of European policies. There is a lot going on, but I prefer to answer to this specific question, because otherwise I start with boring talks about evolution of EU policies. And thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Look, as someone who is firmly part of the European bubble, I'm never bored about EU policies, but indeed maybe for the general audience that we have here today, it could be a bit technical and a bit dull. So look, let's see what comes through the chat. I'll just remind anyone, if you do have questions for either Milo or our next speaker, Christoph, then please put those in the chat, and we'll try and come to those in the Q&A after the presentations. So Milo, thank you very much. And we'll pass over to our second speaker, which is Christoph Sykes, who is the Director General of Construction Products Europe. So Christoph is an experienced EU public affairs professional, having worked for various Brussels-based European non-profit associations since 2003. As the Director General of Construction Products Europe, Christoph's main tasks are to identify, analyse, report, and help define industry positions vis-à-vis EU legislative initiatives, of which at the moment, as I'm sure Christoph will explain, there are many important ones on the agenda. He accomplishes his work through the development and execution of public affairs strategies, network development, coalition building, and management of the Secretariat. So, Christoph, I will give you the floor if you can just turn on your microphone and camera. I'm not sure if the moderator can. Christoph, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. I was muted by the organizers. So.
Sorry about that. Okay,
No
so Christoph, you've heard Milo's presentation, so we give the floor to you for the other part of the puzzle.
Thank you very much, Dara, and thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Just to reframe the scene. In terms of EU policy, legal framework, the EU can only offer legislation on the single market for construction products. Everything else falls to national, regional, local authorities. If I give you two examples, the EPBD, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So it is a directive. A directive can be influenced at a national level or implemented in different ways. And again, it's the fourth time they're having a go at revising it. And if we look at, somebody mentioned the digital aspects, there is another EU project on digital building logbooks, But again, it's looking at what's being done across the EU, making suggestions, but in no way giving it a EU framework to the building logbooks as we know them. And Dara, if you allow me to address a few of the statements, including one of yours earlier, there is nothing called a sustainable product or even environmentally friendly product. There are only construction products. All these terms are marketing terms. And you can buy whatever product you want for construction. They have characteristics and declared performance. It's not the lawyer in me because I'm not a lawyer, but that's what it is. Each one has a purpose, a performance and characteristics, and then, and I should probably also mention the price, and whoever selects the products picks what he wants for the purpose and the performance he wants to achieve, and that's what it is. Dara, you mentioned the revision of the CPR, extremely complex, and it will not change anything about the labeling because there's no need to change the labeling. It is as transparent as it is. Just try it out. Next time you walk past the building site, there'll be a pile of products on, there to be installed, and you will find a piece of paper which is the CE marking with the declared characteristics. So that's the labeling right there and then for you to check. The one thing I would say about this specific legislation for construction products, we have the construction products regulation that is applicable as we speak, and it's been enforced for 10 years now, actually includes a part on sustainability. And it says, we could declare some characteristics, but the specific nature of this regulation is that it is not up to manufacturers to decide what they declare. It is member states with the Commission that define the list of characteristics, and it would be illegal for any producer to deliver sustainability information as part of the CE marking procedure. That is why the industry invented EPDs, environmental product declarations, over a decade ago, and we deliver this information free of charge to the market. So again, just to say that we believe in sustainability information, and we've been doing it based on a European standard for over a decade. The main purpose today was to talk about circularity. Again, we didn't wait for legislation to come in. Getting our hands on resources, even secondary resources, is part of the process of our industry. The crucial element is we need to get good quality and high quantity of this material, and as you probably know, waste is not allowed to cross EU borders. So where your operations are, you need to secure these secondary raw materials. And again, I use this legal term because you don't bring waste in your operations, you only bring in resources. Before, I don't want to take too much time, but just to again frame it, and I come back to my first point, we have a lot of concepts floating around in the European sphere, one being circularity. But today, whether you're the building owner or the investor, is being encouraged, even financially supported, to look at the energy performance of the buildings. So the first element that people will think of is energy performance, and we see a rush towards renovation for insulation of buildings, which makes complete sense. But then there's also talk about net zero and the carbon footprint. Affordability is under-talked, and I shouldn't tell you that, coming from the Housing Europe. We see a housing crisis all over the EU, including Ireland. Actually, your Prime Minister is trying to do something about it at the moment. Accessibility is a crucial element. And so with all these theoretical targets, and knowing that we probably just invest once in our lifetime in our housing unit, how do we make sure that the target is the best one, or a combination of all amongst all these theoretical targets? And that's where the big challenge comes in, not only in terms of the investment selection and purpose, but also the legal framework that spans EU national regional competence. So I leave it there for now, and look forward to Q&A and to answer any questions that may come forward. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Very succinct, and indeed, it's why it's good to have people like you and Milo on this call, because you can pick me up on my incorrect vernacular, let's say. Even if I had the right idea, maybe it wasn't the right phrasing. So indeed, thank you for the explanations. So indeed, again, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat, but I might kick off proceedings with one or two questions I've prepared myself. So going to Christoph first, you mentioned that at the EU level, at least, there's a lot of terminology floating around and a lot of different initiatives that are being planned. But just from the point of view of the organizations that you represent, how well defined are the barriers of the circular economy? I mean, when you look at business opportunities for developing new products and new solutions for buildings, are the definitions clear enough, or is that something the EU still needs to work on in order to make it clear for the people that you represent what it is they maybe should be aiming towards in terms of new products and new ways of developing components for buildings?
Again, the concepts are there, and it's great to have a place where we can think and make things move forward. If you bring me to products, easy example is to talk about recycled content. Again, the industry didn't wait. We have a great diversity of products, even within single product families. If you take I'll stick to the energy efficiency example. You will have insulation material with really high recycled content. It will have a performance and a price. You will have the brand new top of the range, new research product with really high performance, maybe no or low recycled content, and price B, and a variety of products in between. You pick and choose. What is it that, what is the overall goal of your project? Is it energy performance? Is it affordability? Is it a combination of both? Is it also an issue of carbon? But then you can compensate. And this is where I was surprised nobody mentioned the Levels initiative by the European Commission. So Levels is the Sustainable Construction Assessment tool that was developed by the Commission with a wide variety of stakeholders, was actually tested on real construction sites. The enthusiasm was so high that we then asked it to do many more things, but it is what it is. And the advantage of it's called Levels with the S between brackets, and you can, like a DJ, play with the tabs and a bit more of this, a bit less of that, and you define what your levels are in terms of the final delivery of the housing unit. Is it more affordability, more this or the other, all the things I've already mentioned? And that's what really we need. And as one of the other speakers stakeholder mentioned, the digital aspect. If you have all this data in digital format, then you can quickly play and fine tune. You could also say, well, I'm in Spain, but the product that I would need comes from Finland. Transport, carbon impact, then I don't take this one, I take another one. And that would be the added value of a digital tool. Digital is never going to be a target. It's always going to be a tool for more selection, and you could even add artificial intelligence, because the quantity of data that's going to be involved is going to be huge. And we need to learn to play with this data to fine tune the selection. I hope that answers your question, Dara.
Yeah, this is a very fascinating topic. I know I've spoken to you before, and I'm sure we could talk all day about this, but time is what it is. But yeah, thank you for that response. Milo, if I can come back to you maybe. Just something I've heard you speak about before that maybe you didn't touch on in enough detail in your opening remarks would be the current system that we have of treating wastewater, particularly leaving our homes and going to these kind of collection points where it's treated and so on. I get the feeling that the current infrastructure is often very, very old. I mean, Christoph mentioned Ireland a minute ago. In Dublin, the piping system is primarily from the Victorian era, so that kind of gives you a sense of where we are. I'm sure many of the cities in Europe are similarly old-fashioned. So is the current infrastructure, I mean, is there an easy transition that we can make, or do we completely need to rethink the entire system and the infrastructure that underpins it for how we take water to and from homes in order to make it more circular?
Thanks, Dara, for this challenging question, which maybe indeed allows me to develop a bit of what we're saying, and maybe I try to address some of your question implicitly in my first address. But first let me say that indeed, at least our Irish member, Irish Water, is investing a lot in innovation of the infrastructures. I mean, there is a significant effort from Irish Water, like from many other utilities across Europe, for the renovation. Then, yeah, I mean, typically, historically, the water distribution system, drinking water and then wastewater, which is much more recent, has been built in a centralized way, which means that you have one or more, but few catchment point for drinking water, that then water goes to one treatment plant that ensure the quality, and then it's redistributed from a centralized point through the water network of houses. And then the same network, parallel one, takes the wastewater and then send it back to one centralized plant to treat it. So this centralized approach to the management of drinking water and wastewater management and wastewater was the traditional one. It still is the case in most of Europe and most of the world, I would say, and used to make a lot of sense economically and environmentally speaking. Now we are reaching the point where we see all the challenges and the limitation of this centralized model, and we need to think to maybe not completely overall, but to alternatives that can couple or integrate the current system to address some of these limitations, which are several. I mean, I could talk for that for hours, and I don't know where to start from. But let's make a simple example. I was mentioning rainwater. We normally, most of them, especially older city in Europe, we collect rainwater through our, sewage network, the same that is collecting wastewater, black water from our houses, and we send everything together to the wastewater treatment plant. This model is not working any longer for a reason that they are also related to climate change, and not only. The best way to address this is to separate the rainwater for the black water, and to go for nature-based solution in cities, which means essentially to increase the naturally sponge capacity of a city. So it's removing soil sealing and removing concrete and creating green spaces. This is a way to address the problem of wastewater management in an urban area. You need to go for that, which is not easy because let me say, but because space in cities is a rare thing, and it's precious, and that is contentious as well. And we need to have policy that assure more green space is not so easy. I mean, you need to remove space for other uses. But this is the way we need to go through. And also some of the solution that has been discussed in a Houseful project, like a nature-based solution in situ within the building to treat part of the wastewater, at least the gray water, in situ. This is also very, very promising because it addresses in part the problem of wastewater, and for sure it reduces the consumption of good drinking water. The point is how to lead this transition, and that's what you were saying, were mentioning, Dara. To ensure this transition is not just a technical matter. It's just not a matter of technological solutions. It is, but it's also a matter of how we lead this societal change. And this has the distributive effects as trade-offs, and so on and so forth. And we need to discuss together, I mean, with experts, but also with policymakers and with other stakeholders, civil society, how we go towards these solutions that on paper are great, and they really are, but they need a collective effort to achieve them.
Perfect.
Dara, do we have a little more time? Or
yes, if you want to come in on that, please go ahead.
I fully agree with what's just been said, and the parallel is easy with the electricity network. You know, we see a drive to solar panels, and then the next drive will be batteries. Of course, the question is, where do we get the resources to manufacture these things and the people to install them? But again, the electricity system was developed as a distribution network, and the crisis now is, well, you know, the solar panels are working daytime, you're at the office, and the electricity has been lost, or you don't get a premium if you inject it in the system because nobody's using it around you. So there's lots of solutions, and it's the same with the water issue. I could mention waterless urinals. There's even now toilets that separate liquids and solids, and men are asked to sit down when they do their business. All these products are already there on the market, you see. So we again, the industry has solutions. The question is, this impacts the urban system and the local system, the neighborhood system, whether it's water or electricity. And how does the local authority, regional authority, address this? They need advice because, again, the investment is heavy and it's once in a lifetime, so better make the right choice. But construction is full of solutions and full of opportunities, but we need a clear way forward. And yeah, if there are any colleagues from the Commission on board, they won't like this one. But if you go back to the Green Deal, they had promised a built environment strategy, which they never delivered. And that was the one thing that we were really looking forward to. It is, can we think together of a way forward to address all these issues that we need to address, and add to the bit, you know, more housing, because we can refurbish as much as we want. The waiting lists wherever you look is long to get access to housing and quality housing. So yeah, lots to talk about, but we won't find solutions just today. But happy to, if there are any questions and we run out of time, I'm always happy to take them via LinkedIn or email. So for everybody, just don't hesitate to get in touch.
You may live to regret that comment, but let's see.
Well, I didn't mention Blackwater and Guinness, but that was just an Irish joke, I guess. Yeah,
exactly. No, well, speaking with you, Christoph. So one of the questions we had earlier was about disassembly of buildings, and I know that's become very trendy at the moment, and a lot of projects are, that are being put out to tender that we see, particularly from social housing, for example, are putting this in the tender that we want future disassembly, we want modular elements, plug and play elements, all these kind of things that, in theory at least, should reduce the waste and should reduce also importantly the labor costs, because if you can kind of put up a whole facade in a matter of hours, that can help your bottom line and your margins. So from the point of view of the people you represent, you know, is this kind of really a fad, or is this really going to be, is this the big thing? Is this the way buildings will be designed going forward?
It is one of the solutions, one of the many solutions. We have sort of ready-made housing units. One of the big business out of the Netherlands was ready-made houses shipped over to the UK. Of course, Brexit's put a bit of a halt on that one, and the big question about mutual recognition of CE marking from across the channel. But no, I mean, all these things are there. Also point you all towards the demolition audits and the beautiful paper drafted with the European Demolition Association and the European Commission. There is talk about revising this guidance paper. It's available in multiple languages. Again, our colleagues from EDA have said always that they can deconstruct and sort in as many parts as whoever wants. The question is always the same: who pays and who gets the benefits? The easy one to understand is, you're going to dismantle a building. Everybody's going to rush to get the copper out and the aluminium because they have value. Let's imagine there is asbestos because it's an old building. Who's going to be liable for that one? Because that comes with a lot of costs. And again, a new initiative by the Commission to deal with asbestos. So plenty of things to do, but it always comes down to the money. And if I can rain on the parade a little bit, construction as a complete industry at the moment is not looking good for this year. There's redundancy happening in companies, and it's not going to look any better next year. So whilst we have climate targets, renovation targets, we're already short of people on the building sites. It is not a promising outlook for at least a couple of years to come. So as I said, challenges, opportunities, but we need to agree on what we do, who does it, who benefits, who pays, because that's the crunch point at the end.
Yes, I completely agree. And actually, on that question of who pays, we have a question in the chat coming for Milo. So it's from Marco Hartel at Alchemia Nova, and he was asking for you, Milo, what would be your suggestion to enable water reuse and implementation of nature-based solutions without causing the kind of negative side effects you mentioned, gentrification, shifting costs to a few, or basically, let's say, the better off people in society reaping the benefits and even a bit of a burden with the lower income people. And he's wondering, could this maybe be achieved by thinking about the bigger picture and aim for an internationalized system of external effects? For example, move towards a polluter pays model of water. I don't know if that's conceivable. So I guess in the end, he's still looking for policy recommendations that can shift the burden of who pays and maybe try to give more benefits to people who maybe don't have the means independently to benefit from changes.
Wow, thanks, Marco, for the question. This question, and if I had a good answer to this question, maybe I wouldn't be here. I would be some political level high there. I don't even know if I can reply. I mean, without moving out from our official position. I mean, let's put it this way. The current model for paying for water service in most European country, it's not the case of Ireland and most of the other, yes, is based on tariffing, volumetric tariffing. The more you consume water, the more you pay. For drinking water and for wastewater is the same. It's calculating on how much you drink, basically. This model makes sense to a certain extent because, well, one assumption behind that is what the official, the position of the Commission as well. I mean, water must have a value, so you can also save. You're not wasting water. That's absolutely true, and so we need that. But we also need to recognize that some of the interventions that are needed to ensure a sustainable use of water resources, a sustainable environment, a system where water resources are managed correctly, and we have good things to address problems like floods or even water scarcity, are intervention that goes to the nature. I mean, it's not on treating water itself. It's, for example, building green areas in cities, absorbing the increasing absorption capacity, restoring the natural flow of rivers. I mean, the natural hydromorphology, as they say, of river. These all helps to address pollution, to address to increase biodiversity, to address water scarcity and floods. I mean, nature itself can do a lot that without our further intervention. However, so these kind of intervention that are needed, since everybody benefits of them, and nobody can appropriate individually from these benefits, they have typically a typical common good nature. Let's put it this way. And maybe volumetric consumption, I mean paying through volumetric consumption, all of this is not really any longer a sufficient and fair approach, because especially if you can add then that especially in an urban environment, it's not necessarily the more well-off that consume more water, because poorer family tend to spend more time at home to cook more, they have less efficient house appliances and more leakages and so on and so forth. Well, then you need to rethink the cost recovery mechanism in the water sector, whereby next to volumetric tariffing, you have other sources of financing that are more calculated on who can benefit on that and who can also pay for that. I mean, to have a fairer system. And then, of course, there is a big issue there, very complicated one, about the fact that there is the water we consume, and then there is directly, and then there is the water we consume through agriculture, so through food, and to our industrial product, textile, housing industry, and so on. We import water. We move water through imports and exports. And our current trade system doesn't take this into account. The European Union is thinking to have a carbon tax, but at a certain point, if we want to have a fairer system at the world level, and one that is pay more attention to natural resources, well, maybe next to carbon, we may also think to other border taxes that takes into account the exploitation of natural resources.
Okay, that's definitely the next thing that we need to advocate for, because we're only looking at one part of the manipulation by foreign producers, or one of the benefits they get. So indeed, water is the next part of the puzzle. Look, we're rapidly running out of time. So what I want to do is, obviously, Houseful is a European, it's a Horizon funded project. It's a research project. It's part of a very big problem, a very big program, as you're well aware, that has literally tens of billions of euro to finance innovation, research, and best practices. So from both of you, maybe Christoph first, in maybe 1 minute, what would be your priorities going forward? What are the areas where we need to know more in order to maybe become more circular that you would like to see the EU kind of investigating?
You're asking a lobbyist for his favorite toy. Next year is EU elections, new parliament, new commission. And as I said, there's a lot of talk in Brussels, and for obvious reasons, it can't go much further because of the national control on buildings. But it would be good to have this sustainable built environment strategy. Maybe start it with a conference and bring the key actors of the value chain, or as we call it now in EU speak, the ecosystem, together and thrash it out. I mean, how do we balance out water efficiency of the buildings with energy efficiency, carbon affordability? End of the day, people are waiting to get a house, or at least a housing, and that should be the driver behind everything. We can't have people in poor dwellings. We need to sort this out, and quality. And of course, if you look across the board to the Ukraine, I mean, we have to rebuild that over there as well. So yeah, let's get heads together and, with the new EU and give it a 5-year plan. So that would be my call to action, not arms, because that would not sound positive.
Perfect. So Mila, what's your favorite toy? If I can borrow the expression from Christoph, what's the thing that you really think we need to putting more of our time into inquiring and developing new approaches for?
Yeah, thanks. So let me eventually then mention at least some European legislation. Going back also to Marco's question, and more or less to what also Christoph was saying before, or at least alluding about also controversial, policy objectives that go in different direction. We often hear in our sector, at least, about water energy nexus. Is a big nexus. I never hear about water, energy, and pollution. The more the waters are polluted, the more energy we needed to unpollute them. Okay, so when we talk about water and energy nexus, let's factor in also the issue of pollution. Otherwise, we don't solve the equation. And let me say that we have a European, we have a directive currently under discussion in the Parliament and the Council, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, a revision, where the Commission has made something very bold, brave, that has introduced a strong principle through which polluters, in particular for micropollutants, should pay all the upgrade of treatment processes that are needed to remove micropollutants. We are fighting hard to keep this provision in the directive and the proposal by the Commission. Is a matter of fairness, of equity, and also a matter of a proper function of the internal market. Last thing, on the research side, again, water is a natural thing. We cannot produce water. Water is what we have is what we have. So what is very promising from our point of view are indeed nature-based solutions. So the nature doing the things, we have to discover nature, which is also a matter of not only of technology, of technique or approach, but also of mindset, of mentality. And this is a common responsibility also of our members to change a bit the ancient engineering approach to water services and to go back to a more holistic approach.
Perfect. Look, like I said, I'm sure we could talk about this all day, and I apologize if we didn't come to your question in the chat. But on that, I think I can hand it. Well, I can say thank you, firstly, sorry, to Milo and to Christoph for your time and for your contributions. I think it was very interesting. Let's see how many messages you get on LinkedIn over the next 24 hours. But on that, Carolina, I handed it back to you for the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you especially to our speakers outside the Houseful project, Christoph and Milo, and everyone on the audience who decided to choose this seminar over other things that you have, and there are many, many offers today. And I hope you are a little bit more curious about our project, and if you want to have more details, please log into or go into our website and into the links that we sent in our presentations, and we can make our presentations available to anyone of who is interested. And also want to thank all our partners in the project that really work a lot with many challenges that we hope to overcome as better as possible and to reach the maximal achievements within this project that is ending in a few days. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.